mostly dry tomorrow with sunny spells, highest temperatures of 3 to 8 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
So not one person has answered our call this week. The prize money has been building and building, and yet again we've another enormous sum of money up for grabs. So to get involved, here's the number you need to know: €92,736.88. Text play to 57557. That's 57557. Get your entry in by 3 tomorrow. Then across the Go Loud network stations, Barry Dunn makes that call. If your phone rings, answer it within 5 rings and tell him the exact amount, and you win that cash. It is €92,736.88. Over 18s only. Text costs $2.50 plus your standard message rate. You can get the terms and conditions on newstalk.com.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
You're welcome back. It is Thursday's Off the Ball. Nathan with you until 10 o'clock. So they're just underway at the Etihad Stadium. It is Manchester City 0, Tottenham 0. There's 3.5 minutes gone. City starting this game 8 points behind Arsenal at the top of the Premier League table, and Pep Guardiola has left Kevin De Bruyne, Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva all on the bench for this game. Julian Alvarez getting a very rare start, a first Premier League start for him since he won the World Cup with Argentina, but it remains scoreless. We keep an eye on that, and particularly of course during the football show as well, where we'll be talking to Curtis Fleming on racism in football, and we'll also be talking to Adam Pope about Leeds United and the pressure that Jesse Marsh is under. But right now though, we're going to talk rugby, and Ireland and Andy Farrell today named a 37-man squad for the Six Nations, which gets underway on Saturday, 2 weeks. And the big shock, well, no doubt about it, is that Joey Carbery was left out of the squad at the expense of his Munster teammate Jack Crowley, and Leinster's Ross Byrne also in as backup to Johnny Sexton. Ulster, the big losers, their poor form has cost the likes of Nick Timoney, Mike Lowry, Kieran Treadwell and James Hume all left out of the squad. Stuart McCluskey and Jacob Stockdale do make it. Jamie Osborne, we've been talking about a lot this week. Leinster's Jamie Osborne is included in the squad. There's a return for Dave Kilcoyne, Robbie Henshaw and Robbie Balakoon among those who are out injured. Rory O'Connor from the Irish Independent is on the line. Evening, Rory.
Hey Nathan, what's the story?
Just how big a shock is Joey Carbery's exclusion?
I was trying to think in terms of Andy Farrell's squad selections, and I don't think it's overdoing it to say this is the biggest shock that he's ever dropped in a squad. Maybe that's just my bad memory. I'm not sure, but certainly I don't think anyone saw it coming. You know, there was rumours yesterday that Ross Byrne will be in, but there was talk that they may pick 4 at halves, which really didn't make sense from a kind of, you know, unless you thought there was more of a doubt over Sexton. But no, nobody saw this coming. Like, he's starting for Munster. He's playing reasonably well. Like, he's not tearing down trees, but he's playing quite well in a Munster team that's been quite resurgent. But you wouldn't say that he's been the star of the show week in, week out. And that Fiji game, I think, damaged him quite badly. And even worse was being injured in the Australia week, because it handed the opportunity to Jack Crowley, who did pretty well, and then Ross Byrne to come off the bench and remind everyone that he's ice cold and that he has a role to play in this World Cup cycle. But yeah, Andy Farrell has been a reasonably predictable selector in terms of his squads. I know putting Mac Hansen in for the first Six Nations game last year was a big shock when it came. So there have been a few curveballs along the way, but he hasn't been there haven't been many of these moments. This was a moment where you saw it and you went, Jesus, that's a big call. It's an understandable call, but for that conversation with Joey Carbery, what that's going to do to him, the fact that he's been the headline all day, he hasn't been ruthless with others, but he's been ruthless here.
We could well be sitting here come October saying, remember that time that Joey Carbery was left out at the start of the Six Nations, and how he has bounced back, and an injury here, an injury there, and suddenly Joey Carbery finds himself in a World Cup squad and finds himself on the pitch in some big games. Is there any sense that this is a kick up the arse for Joey Carbery, that while his form has been good, he still hasn't put that bit of pressure on Sexton? Like, there's no question whatsoever coming into this Six Nations, into the World Cup, that Johnny Sexton is by far and away the number one out half. And rather than looking up at Sexton, Carbery spent most of his time actually having to look behind him and try and protect his position, which for a player of his experience, he needs to be past that.
It is a kick up the arse for Carbery, but I don't think that's the primary reason for it. I don't think it's look, if he comes back and he plays so well that they can't not pick him for France, that's the that's the perfect goal. But this looks like they're moving on from him. You know, like he does have a role to play. I think he will play for Ireland again. That I'm not writing him off by any manner of means. But there's only 5 competitive games until the World Cup. If they thought he was the man, they would be picking him in the squad. It's too close, and he's had so many chances. He's been consistently, I'm just looking at the stats here, since he became available to play for Andy Farrell, which was in the July window in 2021. He was injured for the whole of 2020 and the 2021 Six Nations. He's been involved in pretty much every match day squad. Certainly when fit, he's been involved. He's either started or come off the bench in every game. He's, you know, when they needed someone in Paris last year, they started him. They almost won the game with him in the team. They have invested heavily in him. He came off the bench in all 4 wins over New Zealand. He came off the bench to close out the South Africa game. He would have played against Australia had he not picked up that injury in the week of the game. And now in the next game, he's gone from the squad altogether. So it's not sending a message to him. It's not about him really. It's about Ireland and Andy Farrell saying the top 3 out halves in this country right now, and the 3 that I think he's treating the Six Nations as importantly as a World Cup. If a World Cup was being picked, the squad was being picked now, these are the 3 he would take. Which is quite a story for Ross Byrne, who's been out of the picture for most of that time that Carbery's been back. Crowley's a different story, you know, a guy who's timing his run really, really well. But for Carbery, it's an awful time to fall out of the squad, and it's a real kick in the teeth for him. So it's a kick everywhere, really. Like, he's been kicked up and down today, and I'm sure he feels absolutely terrible. But he's probably starting against Toulouse on Sunday, and if he plays well there, he's going to send a message. So I guess that's what Farrell wants to see. But you know, it's I don't think it's about that message. I think it's more about Farrell going, I need to have these are the guys that I'm going to take with me.
If he's going with the form out halves, how does he know that Jack Crowley is one of them, considering he's played once since his last appearance for Ireland for Munster at out half? Yeah,
and like, you can't really claim form in a lot of the selections across the board. Stockdale wouldn't be in on form really. There's others playing well, and Farrell really does value what you've done in camp before, and like, they can see Crowley. I mean, the fact that he's playing well at 12 probably bolsters his case as well, because that means they can pick a back 3 player on the bench as well as Crowley if Crowley's that man. So he covers a couple of positions in the way that Carbery does. He can play fullback as well. So he's starting in the Munster team. He's looking good in the Munster team. I would suspect that if Johnny Sexton was injured, they might go with Ross Byrne, because he is playing alongside Gibson Park behind this pack. He's an experienced 10. He's got a lot more games under his belt, and he's playing really, really well. But look, I'm guessing at that really. Crowley, I think, is the one that they see as probably the long-term successor to Johnny Sexton now. I think they see a lot of like for like kind of images. When they look at Crowley, they see a bit of Sexton in him. I think they like Frawley as well, but he's injured at the moment, and you know, he looked like he was going to get that role. It changes so quickly. He looked like he was going to be that third choice before November, before he picked up that injury against the New Zealand A side. So, you know, the picture does change, but the window is narrowing, and Crowley is being backed based on what he did for Emerging Ireland, based on what he did in November. They really like him. Mike Catt, I've never heard Mike Catt talk as effusively about anyone as he talked about Jack Crowley today before the Australia game. And I know he was giving him confidence, but he likes his attitude. They like a lot about him. And you know, I keep coming back to a Crowley. O'Gara tried to sign him for a reason. You know, if O'Gara is trying to sign one of your young 10s, there's a reason to look at him. You know, and he's a really talented player. Again, he doesn't have a lot of time to build the experience that you need for that World Cup. And again, Ireland want to win the Six Nations. If it'll be fascinating to see who they put on the bench for Sexton. If Sexton's playing his first match in a number of months, do you go with Ross Byrne? I think I could see them doing that.
It must be a bit of a frustration for Andy Farrell that he's sort of right back at square one in terms of the out half conversation, that we're here, you know, a year and a half on, and we're still having the same chat about like which of them is going to be on the bench against Wales at the Millennium Stadium. Will it be Crowley? Will it be Byrne?
I don't think that there's no other nation in world rugby that obsesses over their second choice 10 like Ireland. It's become quite something. But you're right. I mean, it was always Carbery. Like, we'd have this discussion, but you knew when he wasn't fit that it was probably going to be him. When Billy Burns and Ross Byrne were getting a go in 2020 and 21, neither of them really grabbed hold of it. And I think Ross Byrne would admit that he never grabbed hold of it, although his opportunities were often in very difficult games.
Well, at least this time, if he gets a start, it won't be away at Twickenham.
That's very true. And I think, he has reached a point in his career through the adversity that he's been through and through the massive amount of games he's been asked to play for Leinster and win for Leinster, that he's a far more, I think he's on an even keel. Like the way he came in against Australia, having not been, he was supposed to be going, none of his family were at that game because he wasn't supposed to be playing. It was Sexton went down in the warm-up and he comes on and kicks the winning goal. That just shows how ready he is in his own mind. Whether he's not as good as Sexton, I don't think, but he is a very, very good out half. Yeah, Farrell's definitely, like this, in an ideal world, there's no way Farrell would be dropping Joey Carbery 8 months out from a World Cup with 5 competitive games to go. That was never part of the plan, but they've just seemed to have lost faith. It's a pity Farrell didn't do any media today. All the other coaches that could pick their squads this last week or two do a press conference, but we'll have to wait until the Six Nations launch on Monday to hear what Farrell has to say about it. And I'm sure he'll be very kind to Joey Carbery in public, but I'd love to have heard that conversation. I'd love to know what he said to Carbery, because he's kept faith with him an awful long time, and Carbery has done it for him in big games in the past. It's a massive call.
Some of the other standout decisions then, Nick Timoney not getting a place. It does feel that Ulster, because of their absolute collapse in form over the last 6 weeks, a lot of their players have paid the price.
Yeah, you can't really argue with most of them. I mean, the one you probably could argue with a bit is Jacob Stockdale. And
is Stockdale that Andy Farrell knows that if you can get him to his absolute best over the next 6 months, his best is more than good enough for Test rugby?
Like, Stockdale's brilliant. He just hasn't played brilliantly for about 2 or 3 years. Part of that was injury, part of that was a loss of form. I do think there's a little bit of concern that James Lowe is down in New Zealand on family business, for family reasons, and we don't know when he'll come back. And Stockdale is probably the most like-for-like replacement for James Lowe in terms of he brings you that left-footed kicking game and stuff. So he fits the bill. Like, he looks like a test player. He has an incredible scoring record. But his form hasn't been great in a terrible Ulster. Sorry, they're not a terrible Ulster team, an Ulster team that are playing terribly. But Timoney, like, it's hard to argue against any of the back rows that have been picked. So really, Timoney, Kieran Treadwell has done very well for Ireland in the past, but he's part of an Ulster team that's getting beaten up every week, and you can't really have 2 locks from Ulster. I think he comes in when Henderson is absent, really, and Joe McCarthy's probably moved ahead of him a little bit. Again, like Crowley, doesn't start every week Crowley is, but he doesn't start in a position necessarily every week. McCarthy is one they really like, and they're investing a lot of time in because they think they can get him right for the World Cup. I think Ryan Baird is in incredible form. Gavin Coombs has, like, the way he's responded to being dropped is an advertisement for dropping a player. Like, if you want to send a message to someone, you go, look at what Gavin Coombs has done since we cut him in November. So really, Timoney, I know there's not really an out-and-out 7 to cover Josh van der Fleer, but I don't think they'll miss Timoney in current form, and they can always, like, none of these players are too far away. It's not like they can't be drafted in if needed. Will Connors is back fit as well, so that's bad news for Timoney if he can get a run of games under his belt. So he's lost a bit of ground. James Hume has lost ground this season. Like, Michael Lowry, like last year, didn't he make his debut in that Italy game and played so well? Could have had a hat-trick if he'd been a bit more selfish. He's dropped off the face of the earth a little bit in terms of selection as well. So there's a lot of players, like, as we get closer to the big show, a lot of players are kind of falling off the wagon, and again, as I said before, there's no time left. There's 3 warm-up games in the summer, one of which I think is after the squad is named, and there's 5 Six Nations games which Ireland want to win. So there's not going to be a lot of caps thrown around like confetti in this month. It's
a 33-man squad as well that will go to the World Cup.
Yeah,
and this is a 37-man. So even out of this, you're losing 4.
So you're losing 4. Robbie Henshaw's not there, so that's one you could pretty much guarantee is going to go to the World Cup. So there's a centre amongst them, and Jamie Osborne's hot right now. So whether like we saw last season, Mac Hansen came in, for his first squad in great form, and Farrell just backed him all the way. He did well in training. The word was he was going great in training, and suddenly he was in the team, and suddenly he was scoring that try against France in Paris, and now he's nailed on starter at right wing. That's the way Farrell, if you're hot, you're hot. He'll back you through, and if he likes what you offer, so not like you wouldn't rule out Jamie Osborne having an impact just yet, So yeah, like there's that drawbridge is narrowing, and in positions like back 3 where you have to be versatile, the halfbacks it's the first time we've had a 33-man squad because it was 31 before this, so we've never seen how they'll split them, but I presume it'll mean 1 front row extra because you won't have someone having to cover both sides, and maybe they'll take a third scrum half, so that probably fills that gap. Previously they've only gone with 2 scrum halves in the last 2 World Cups, so you know, there's probably going to lose a back row, and you're probably going to lose an outside back or two, and maybe a centre. So, you know, you'd be a bit nervous if you're in one of those positions.
The inclusion of Conor Murray probably underlines Joey Carbery left out that actually he has selected some of the more experienced players based on what they've done for him previously, despite the fact both himself and Keith Earls weren't selected. Where's Keith Earls standing at the moment with Ireland?
Well, I think Keith Earls is viewed as an excellent kind of leadership figure. I don't want to be patronising toward Keith Earls, because he has been an excellent international rugby player. He's 35 now. He played in the first test against New Zealand, and then he captained the team against the Maori in the second game, the one they won. And, you know, he missed November through injury, so it's hard to know where he really stands. Hansen, I think, has come in, and you see what Hansen and Lowe offer in terms of coming off their wing and really breaking the game up. I don't think Earls offers that anymore. He's played a pivotal role in this era. Like, you know, his try against England in that 2021 Six Nations game was the turning point for the entire Andy Farrell era. So, you know, he has been a very important player for Farrell, and I think Farrell has an incredible amount of respect for him. But I don't see where he gets into the team on current form. And over the course of they won the New Zealand tour really without him, because he dropped out of the team for the second and third test. He could be a number 23. You know, he would be a great kind of leadership figure to have on your bench, a calming influence. He's seen as a great example for the younger players because of how professional he is, how he prepares for games, a good voice around the training camp. People like him. And while some people might say that's not a reason to pick him ahead of kind of younger, more hungry backs who are in better form, it's very important to the Andy Farrell model. He talks about glue players. Conor Murray is someone, he said before his 100 cap, you know, form comes and goes. You get these players, the media and fans will talk up, but what I respect is players who've able to do it over the course of a career, who always perform for me. And he talked about being in all of those players, including Conor Murray. And I think he has a symbiotic relationship with his senior players who got him the job with Joe Schmidt in the first place. They went to Schmidt and said, this guy's a really good defence coach. And he's almost drawn them in close to him as the kind of senior men, his lieutenants in this squad. And it's worked for Ireland. Like, I would prefer a completely form-based, quite ruthless approach, but I can't go and tell you that Andy Farrell's doing the wrong thing, because he's done so well with this team and this has worked, and they all look so happy in that camp. So where he stands in terms of selection, he's a massive job to do. If he features against Toulouse, it would be a help, because he'd be able to play his way into the team, but he hasn't played enough rugby, and he hasn't played enough good rugby really to be considered for selection ahead of someone like Jordan Larmour's in fantastic form, and he's probably going to lose out to Mac Hansen.
We have Toulouse against Munster live in the Heineken Champions Cup coming away on Sunday afternoon on Off the Ball. Just on that, Rory, any chance the call goes down to Limerick tomorrow and says, actually, put Jack Crowley in at number 10?
I do think, while they have some influence from time to time, I think a pivotal Heineken Champions Cup game is beyond the realm, and I think Farrell wouldn't do that to Graham Roundtree, his old mate from England camp. I think if it was a URC game, they might be able to lean on them a little bit. And Crowley missed a bit of training this week. He didn't train on yesterday when Munster were doing their main session, so I think Carbery is in position to start. They'd like to see him start a big Heineken Cup game away to Toulouse, but we saw him close out a big Heineken Cup game at 10 last week, so he is getting big moments in that position, and he delivered for Munster in fairly trying circumstances against Northampton last week. And maybe that's the moment where we should have realised what was coming, because it was O'Mahony and Carbery who were taken off for Munster when the game was there to be won, and it was Crowley who was sent out to win it. So, you know, Munster are obviously growing in their faith in Crowley is growing. So I don't think, like, I wouldn't rule out him starting at 10, but I think Carbery, having run things in training all week, unless, like, you just don't know how this has affected his confidence. You know, how is he? He's had a couple of really tough injuries, but this is the hardest day of Joey Carbery's career, apart from being told he's going to miss a few months with injury. And this is going to be a real mark of his strength of character to be able to come back from this. If he does make the World Cup from here, he will deserve it, because, like, I can't imagine how he's feeling tonight. All right, Rory, great stuff as always. Cheers, Nathan. Roy O'Connor there, and all our rugby and off the ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. They're at the midway point of the first half at the Etihad. It is Manchester City 0, Tottenham 0. Back in a moment.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Roll camera. Rolling.
On this week's Movies and Booze, we'll be reviewing Babylon, starring Brad Pitt and Kate Blanchett in Tar. Plus, we might think we know our tea here in Ireland, but we'll hear from an actual expert, a tea sommelier. And of course, we've got some wine suggestions. All that and more Friday from 2.
Movies and booze on Moncrief
With Marks and Spencer.
Cut!
on News Talk.